Welcome to Writing Women, a show where I will be exploring the women who exist in fiction and the people who created them. For my first project, I decided to reread books by my favorite author, Tamora Pierce. Mrs. Pierce is known for writing female protagonists almost exclusively. When asked about it, she talks about how she loved fiction growing up and wanted to write about women because she noticed a distinct lack of them in the books she read. Enter Alanna, the protagonist of her Song of the Lioness quartet. Tammy has talked about how Alanna's story was originally written as one single book with more of an adult lean to it. Eventually, she made some edits to it and broke it up into smaller chunks, and this turned it into the YA fantasy series that we have today. Her books don't really pull punches. They deal with puberty, sex, death, romance, betrayal, and devotion to your loved ones. There's honestly so many themes in her books, it's kind of hard for me to categorize them all, but these are the themes in her books as a whole. Added to that are the ones specific to the book I want to talk about today, which is Alanna the First Adventure, which is the first book in her Song of the Lioness quartet. This book also deals with childhood trauma, abusive parents, internalized misogyny, and looking at it with a current lens, possibly questioning of your gender identity. Recently, there's been a lot of buzz about her books after an announcement that there will finally be an on-screen adaptation of her work. So her fans have been waiting since the early 80s when she first began publishing for this kind of news. As technology has evolved, she has kind of evolved with it, and she's maintained a constant online presence in the digital age. She has had a website, a blog, Twitter, all sorts of social media accounts that her fans can follow, and she puts out information through them. She talks about current writing projects. She even inquires about information from her fans. So I remember at one point on her blog, she asked a question to her fans. She described a type of bracelet and was like, does anybody know what this type of bracelet's called? It's really escaping me, but I want to write about one in a story, and I don't know what it's called, and I want to get the description of it right. And, a couple of people jumped in and were like, oh, it's this type of bracelet. And when she finally published that next book, I went in and was reading it. And when I got to a part where it's just one little part in the book where she talks about this bracelet that someone has. And I remembered back to that blog entry and was just like, oh my God, there it is. I remember her talking about that. That's so cool that she puts that much thought into what she writes. I hear it now, an author with a dedicated fan base who sometimes puts out new info to fans through social media platforms. Is this going to be another J.K. Rowling, Dumbledore was gay all along, even though I don't include it in the narrative, even when given the option to situation? The answer, not really. I wanted to read this tweet directly, so this is what she tweeted in response to someone else. She said, Alanna has always defied labels. She took the best bits of being a woman and a man and created her own unique identity. I think the term is gender fluid, though there wasn't a word for this, to my knowledge, when I was writing her. And I think that's interesting. That's not necessarily her coming out and saying, yes, I wrote her as gender fluid the whole time. It's her kind of saying, I think she kind of falls into this category, and to my knowledge, we didn't really have a term for it then, or at least I didn't know the term for it then, and I would consider this to be what she is now. And I think that's kind of cool. But anyway, in one of her later series, she includes a character who is a lesbian. She has casts of characters from different cultural and racial backgrounds, and makes a pretty clear effort to have those things be a big part of their character, instead of, this character's Asian, but it doesn't inform their character at all. All that in mind, Alanna as gender fluid makes a lot of sense to me. In a later episode, I will get more into the fictional countries around Tortal and their real-life counterparts, but that would be a bit much for one episode. So for now, I'm going to roll right along into the recap. Spoilers ahead. I will largely be taking this summary from just the basic summary that is on Wikipedia, because I tried over and over and over to write my own summary of this story, and it just did not work out. I could not get a good summary to save my life. I made a handful of edits here and there, just some stuff that I felt was like, yeah, I could shorten it a little bit or add in a little bit that I thought was important. So here we go. We begin with Alanna and her brother Tom. They are twins and being sent off to their respective training in the City of the Gods, where Alanna is to learn to be a lady, and the capital city of Chorus, where Tom is to become a knight. As you can expect, neither of them are too happy with this. So with the help of Maud, the local healer woman who helped raise the twins and taught them to use their magic, they switch places. Tom forges new letters in their father's handwriting to say that Tom is to be taught magic and his brother Alan will be a knight in training. Also helping the twins is Coram. He's the soldier who taught Alanna how to fight and ride her pony, and he's at first really skeptical, but he reluctantly agrees to help. Now, this is something that I'm adding into the summary because I think it's really important to point out, and if you haven't read the book in a long time, it might not be something you exactly remember. All this is possible because, as we find out in bits and pieces through the story, the twins' father is an absent figure in their lives. The death of their mother caused their father to develop a deep hatred for magic. He insists the twins never use their gift and stops using his, then focuses entirely on his scrolls, as many characters say throughout the book. Alanna repeatedly is shown in the story how little her father cares or pays attention to her, which plays a lot into the development of her relationship later on with Sir Miles of Olo, I believe that's the correct pronunciation. I looked up the pronunciation guide on Tammy's website, and I'm pretty sure that that's how it's said based on that guide. She develops a very father-daughter relationship with him, and he acts as a mentor to her throughout most of her life. So at the palace, Alanna, now going by Alan, trains as a page and meets her new friends. Among them are Raoul of Golden Lake, Gareth the Younger of Naxon, Francis of Nand, Alexander of Tiragen, and Prince Jonathan of Conte. She also makes an enemy during her first day at the palace, Rallin? I didn't look up his name in the pronunciation guide, so sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, of Malvin, who continuously bullies her. Rather than have her companions beat him, Alanna secretly trains with George Cooper, the king of the Court of the Rogue, a friendly thief and master of the capital city's criminal underworld, until she can beat him herself. When she does, he leaves court, vowing revenge on her. During Alanna's page years, a fever, the sweating sickness, spreads within the capital city and nowhere else. The disease is different from all other known diseases in that it drains healers of their powers to heal, and even kills them. There is talk that it was sent by a great sorcerer. Alanna has a powerful healing gift, but is frightened to use it, so she doesn't tell anyone that she can heal. Due to this refusal of her abilities, Francis of Nand, one of her friends, dies. When Prince Jonathan falls ill, Alanna recognizes herself as the only undrained healer in the city and tries to heal him. She succeeds, but only through evoking the Great Mother Goddess and fetching Jonathan from the place between life and death. In doing so, she unknowingly reveals herself as a female to Sir Miles of Olo, one of her mentors. Shortly after, Jonathan's powerful sorcerer cousin, Duke Roger of Conte, comes to live at the palace and teach the gifted pages and squires magic. Alanna goes to George Cooper's mother, a healer, after she has her first monthly period. She tells George the truth about her gender. Incidentally, that's one of my favorite scenes in the book. I absolutely love that scene. I cannot get enough of it. Sometimes I'll pull the book down off my shelf and I will just reread that scene because it is great. I cannot wait to see it on screen. Jonathan also discovers the truth during Alanna's last year as a page when she comes on a trip for the squires on the behest of Princess Jonathan to Persepolis, the only city of the Bazir, a race of nomadic desert people. All the squires were warned to stay away from the Black City, a city just within view of Persepolis, by Duke Roger. However, Jonathan decides to ride to the city to defeat whatever evil lies there, and Alanna goes with him to help him in his quest. The two arrive at the city to find it completely deserted. That is, until they enter the large central temple, where they find the Isandir, beings who will not age or starve as mortals will, but that can be killed. Jonathan and Alanna begin to fight, but things began to go awry when one of the Isandir magically removes Alanna's clothes to reveal her true sex. Jonathan saves his shock for later, as Alanna and Jonathan must combine their powers to defeat the Isandir. With the help of her magical sword given to her earlier by Sir Miles, Alanna defeats the last of the Isandir, and Jonathan and Alanna head back to Persepolis. The book ends at an oasis near Persepolis, where Alanna suggested that perhaps Roger had wanted Jonathan to go to the city. Jonathan said that yes, he had, but only so that Jonathan could rid Tortall of a great evil. When Alanna pointed out that perhaps Roger had not expected him to come back alive, Jonathan refused to listen. After this, Jonathan chooses Alanna to be his squire when he is knighted that year. He says he does not care that she's a girl because she is the best page regardless. So that is the first book. And now we're going to get into my notes on the book, which is the kind of discussion-y portion of this show, where I'm just going to kind of talk about the various things that I find interesting, stuff that just kind of popped into my head while I was rereading it. And keep in mind, I've not read these books all the way through in years. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about how long it's been since I first read these books when I was around, 12, 13. I found one of her books when I was in around middle school in our school library. We only had a handful of her books, maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they were all from different series. And I picked up one and read it and absolutely loved it, read all of the other books we had in the library, and then when I went to high school, I was able to find we had about 8 more of her books that weren't the ones I'd read in middle school, and I read those. And then I was able to get my mom to start reading the books, and she became obsessed with them and would buy them in sets so that she could read them and give them to me after she read them, which is incidentally how I got all of my copies of the book. So it's been a long time. I'm kind of coming to this fresh because I only remember just absolute basic story points from these books. And I was surprised at how much happens in them. Just in the first book, so much happens that I did not remember. And I was surprised because she manages to make it stay so exciting and so interesting and still so believable that all of these things are happening, because time is passing at a breakneck speed in these books. The first book is only around 250 something pages with large print. All of that stuff that I just said happens in it. And it takes place over the course of a handful of years as Alanna is growing up and reaching the age 14 where she's going to become a squire. I'm using a paper script, and so there's a lot of paper shuffling going on, and I'm really hoping that a lot of it isn't picked up on the mic, but it probably is. And if that bothers you, I am very sorry. This is one of the few books that I find a character looking in a mirror. So in terms of the whole writing women thing, one of the largest things that people make fun of in women characters being written in books specifically is that a really cheap cop-out way for the author to show what the character looks like is the woman admiring herself in a full body mirror where she looks and says, yes, I look at myself in the mirror and admire my long curly blonde hair that reaches down to my hips, and my alabaster skin. I admire the shape of my nose and its size," and how it's just a little silly because in these average everyday lives, it's just not something that women typically do. We don't typically just stand naked in front of a mirror and go, "Oh man, look at my body. Let me just categorically go through every single bit of my appearance." And I think it's really kind of funny that while that trope exists in this book, it is not dumb. I think that's the only way I can really say it. The use of this is in one scene where Alanna reaches over. She's, getting dressed, and as she's, walking past the mirror, she notices her chest jiggle a little bit. And she realizes, oh my gosh, I'm going through puberty and I'm growing boobs. That is what's happening. And she freaks out and she calls Coram and she, has to figure out on the fly that how to bind herself. So, Coram goes and gets bandages for her to bind herself, and he kind of thinks it's a little funny. But I just thought that was a really interesting thing, because she does stop and take stock of herself in the mirror, but it kind of makes sense narratively, because she hadn't realized her body was growing, because when we live with our bodies every day, maybe we don't necessarily notice when certain changes are happening, but she just happens to be passing in front of that mirror, and as she takes a step, she notices a little jiggle, and she's like, oh my God. So I thought that was pretty cool. In the book, Alanna is described as having guts but not much sense by Stefan the Hostler, who is someone who works for George Cooper, the King of the Thieves. And I think that's a really cool description of her, because it's a major flaw of hers that throughout her books she works to overcome. But I just thought that description of like she has guts but not much sense was really, really nice. That's a really good way to put it, because she frequently puts herself in these situations, like when she's being bullied by the Rowland character, and he's bullying her, and Stefan witnesses a lot of it, and she insists that he not tell any of her friends because she wants to deal with it herself. And this dude watches her get beat to a bloody pulp, and he understands that the reason that she doesn't want her friends to know about it is because of her pride, but to him it would make more sense for her to tell her friends so they could help her deal with it. And it's some neat little moments for her. I thought it was really interesting when she starts her training, and after the first couple of days she wants to quit. She is just, this is too much. I can't do it. My body is aching all the time. I can't do it. I'm not getting any sleep. What do they expect from me? I can't do this. And it was really interesting to me, because that is something that's very, very similar to what people who go to boot camp experience. And they don't see how they can manage to remember all of this. They don't see how they can manage to do all of this, all of this physically demanding stuff, because their bodies are aching all the time. They're always hungry. They're always tired, and they don't think they can manage it. And so they'll drop out, because it's really, really hard. But I just thought it was kind of funny that she showed that experience so well in this character of this little girl who's getting trained to be a knight, and it resonated with me so much, because it was basically what I experienced when I was in boot camp. And she kind of buckled in and decided like, oh, I'll give it a week. And it was the same as my experience, where I was like, oh, I'll give it a week. And then at the end of that week, I thought, I'll try another week. And at the end of that week, I thought, oh, I'll try a third week. I guess I can make it through a third week. And at that point, you're so far into it that you feel like, well, if I quit, I've already spent so much time doing this training. Like, what's even the point if I quit? I've already made it this far. I guess I can make it the rest of the way. Miles, at different points, asks Alanna, for details on what's going on. He kind of notices that she's getting bullied. He asks her what she has to prove, and I think that really, really nails it in terms of her character. He's asking her what she has to prove, and what she has to prove to herself, not and other people, but mostly to herself, is that she needs to prove that she's worthy. And she does not feel like she's worthy. She feels like she is an imposter. She feels like she doesn't belong there, despite the fact that she's able to keep up with all of the other boys. She feels like she doesn't belong there because, in her words, she's just a girl. She's just pretending. And I think that it's really cool that this book from the 80s has Sir Miles and his arguments against toxic masculinity in it, which is basically what his arguments about the code of chivalry boil down to. It's said a bunch of times in the book that he really harps on their code of chivalry, and his argument is that, and this is a direct quote because I just really like it. We are taught that noblemen must take everything and say nothing. Noblemen must stand alone. Well, we're men, and men aren't born to stand alone. And I just really like that sentiment because it seems very ahead of its time. Now we're having that conversation a lot in media in general, and as a lot in a cultural sense about how society teaches men that they need to stand alone, that they need to not whine about things. They need to keep everything locked inside. And it's just really cool that this is a book from the early 80s. This book was published in 1983. And she goes into detail on that kind of thing. So the final fight with Rowland is great. It's pretty simple and easy to follow, and it's really easy to visualize. And I really like that in a book. I have a hard time visualizing fights specifically. I have a pretty easy time visualizing other stuff, but fights specifically, I just kind of lose track of what's going on. But the way she describes fight scenes has always been something that I'm able to follow. It's really basic. This happens, this happens, this happens, and this happens. The lessons of the story, I realize more and more, affected my whole life. Alanna being sick after the fight with Rowland and upset because she only won because she knew more tricks than he did, after her extra training with George and her meditation on the lesson that as a knight she would have to face people less trained than her and thus needed to be wise about applying that training, is so powerful, and I think that's a big part of what makes her great as a character. The use of the fight to try and stem her case of literal imposter syndrome is also a nice touch. So during the sweating sickness, I don't know how much I buy the king and queen trusting Alanna with healing John. It's one of those things where it had to happen for the narrative, so she found a way to make it come about. And it's sort of believable because she proves to the main healer that she's very powerful and she knows what she's doing, but she's also 11. And, when I was younger reading it, little me, like 12, 13, I was like, yeah, she can do it. Everybody knows she's the main character. She can do it. But me as an adult reading it, I really couldn't get the buy-in for that. And I guess that's just the difference between, it was written as a young adult novel and I am no longer a young adult. But when I was younger, I thought, oh yeah, sure, that makes sense. I've seen how responsible she is. I know she can heal him. But now at age 30, I'm like, this royal couple really trusted a little shrimpy 11-year-old boy they have never met with healing their son of a magical, super deadly sickness that's killing people left and right. Alanna's relationships with George, John, and even Miles progress so naturally. There's this common theme in books, YA books in particular, where people are mean to each other, that friend-style ribbing or roasting of each other. Every YA reviewer ever has talked about the toxic romance tropes and all that kind of stuff, but those things aren't limited to portrayals of romance. When Alanna makes it clear she doesn't like being teased about swimming, we know that the reason she doesn't like swimming because she doesn't want to reveal that she's a girl, and if she went swimming with her friends, they would figure it out. And she reveals that she doesn't like being teased about it, so her friends stop teasing her about it. They even have a conversation to clear the air after. They have a brief little bit where she just kind of snaps on them and just says, I really don't like being teased about that. Please stop. And she kind of explains herself a little bit, and they have a conversation about how she always seems like she's so afraid that people won't like her and how they're her friends, so it doesn't matter if she tells them that she wants them to stop teasing her. They're going to be her friends regardless. And I just thought that was so sweet because in modern storytelling, we see it so often with friend characters where they're just constantly teasing each other. And I thought it was very, very sweet that we see that kind of being turned on its head in this story. And this story doesn't have all of that manufactured drama of constant misunderstandings and arguments. I love the characters because they are just kind and honorable and good to each other. Well, the good guys are anyway. Obviously, the bad guys aren't. So that about does it for my kind of official notes, but kind of free-form thoughts on it. This entire book series affected me so deeply growing up, and I just never really realized how much until I went back in to reread them now. Doing this whole writing women thing, I think I'm going to come up against a lot of those strong female protagonists. I don't know if you could hear the air quotes there, but I was definitely doing them. And, you know, those characters that are written for women to watch it and go, heck yeah, that's empowering. And it's really not. It's kind of like faux empowering. And I think Alanna really embodies the traits and just wonderful things that add up to a character actually being a strong female protagonist. And I just love it so much, and I'm so glad that I found these books when I was younger, and I really hope that more people do. For the next episode of the show, I haven't decided if I'm going to go straight into In the Hand of the Goddess or if I'm going to go to a different piece of media, but we will find out when I upload it, won't we? If you liked this at all, go ahead and give me a like or a subscribe or, you know, whatever you want to do. I won't judge you if you don't. This is my first time uploading something, so I'm pretty nervous about it. And realistically, I've been putting this off for a really long time. I've had this recording set for a while, and I just have not uploaded it. I've just been so scared to do it. I don't know why. It's just that weird procrastination, anxiety thing. But I really hope you guys like this. If you want me to cover a specific piece of media, then let me know in comments. I really appreciate you listening this far. Thanks so much.